G'day folks, I proposition people to postulate the preposterous, pernicious paragon of parasitic practices pronounced property propaganda.
Renovating houses.
So, as I am one to do, let's take this back 100 years. Edward Bernays was a World War II propagandist for the USA and an actual relative of Sigmund Freud. This man revolutionized advertising, turned ads from being just like a publication of your product for the sake of public awareness to actually being manipulative, to properly playing on the primal emotions of human beings to manipulate them into buying things. This turned advertising into propaganda. Playing on human desires such as lust and status, this revolutionized it. The greatest example of this is that Edward Bernays was tasked with selling cigarettes to women by a specific tobacco company because there was a stigma at the time, and that stigma was that it wasn't ladylike to smoke cigarettes. He handled this brilliantly. He marketed it as sort of a wave of feminism. Women can enjoy the things that men enjoy too. Let's fight the stigma of women having to be ladylike and smoke cigarettes. And it's a stroke of genius. It worked really well. Not for the better. That's terrible. In fact, almost all instances of propaganda are looked upon as bad. They age poorly. All instances of propaganda pretty much age poorly as manipulative, and just especially when they work for tobacco companies and just things that exacerbate societal problems. Examples of this is selling inefficient metal death traps as symbols of status and chick magnets instead of just appliances, cars that get you from point A to point B, ideally reliably and efficiently. But no, that's not how cars are marketed. So many cars are just marketed as status symbols, chick magnets. And that's let car manufacturers get away with just making crappy cars that break down and drink petrol, which is not why smart people buy cars, as well as threatening the superficial insecurities of women to sell them beauty products, which is again done to this day. But these marketing schemes set the societal standard, not for the sake of bettering society or for the majority of people, but for just profit and business at the price of excluding everyone and isolating everyone who cannot afford to take part in said advertised luxuries. This practice of boosting consumerism despite the best interests of the consumer is being used by Australia's laziest wealth class. That's right, folks, we're talking about landlords. The Australian dream for the last 2 decades has basically been to save up to buy a house, or at least get a loan for a house, and then to pay off the loan for that house, and then buy a second house and never contribute to society ever again. That's the Australian dream. To basically retire on renters. So that's the Australian dream, and believe it or not, it's actually caused problems. Yeah. It's obscene. The people who work with their hands may likely never see the kind of financial security of people that do nothing but own property. And it's a failing of society and government and tax. There's a lack of discussed stigma around this too, because, well, for one, people just sort of need a house to live in, and sometimes people just have a house so they have a place to live. And I don't blame them. I personally believe that shelter is a fundamental human right, and everyone should have a place to sleep away from the rain and the cold. So that's one reason there's not a sort of discussed stigma around owning property, which kind of fair enough. But 2, and this one's weird, delusion, mass delusion. the majority of people believe they are above average intelligence. That is a statistical impossibility if you take 5 seconds to think about it. And likewise, so many, most of the people that live in Australia think that they'll get enough to buy a house and be able to retire on renters. And this whole inflationary market is predicated on people who are desperate and have money. And the problem with inflation is that at a certain point you run out of that Venn diagram of consumers where people with desperation and people with money meet in the middle. And so you sort of run out of those people, you run out of customers. You have people that are desperate but have no money, and people that have money but are not desperate. And so that sort of consumer gap does have an end to it eventually. And third of all, why is there no stigma around this? Property propaganda. So what is property propaganda? Roll it. I knew there was a lot of these going into this video, but there's so much. I got a list of them and it's crazy. And another thing, they're almost all free to air. There's like 3 or 4 Foxtel ones and 1 Amazon Prime one, and they're all Australian too. It's ludicrous how many of these there are. There's so many. I'm just gonna let that roll while I keep doing this because it's gonna be there a while. These are ads. This is an ad. These are advertisements, and worst of all, it's not very entertaining. They're boring shows. Like, I've seen infomercials that are more entertaining than this. So this machine is designed to prop up a housing market bubble and sort of put people inside the bubble so the government becomes too afraid to pop it. I'll tell you what I mean by bubble. About over 20 years ago, little over 20 years ago, the Howard government, and I am seriously oversimplifying and really brushing over the subject of negative gearing here because it's a bit of a whole thing, and I get the gist of it, but I'm not an expert. But I'm pretty accurate in what I'm about to say. Again, oversimplification though. Over 20 years ago, John Howard put in place tax breaks for property owners, and this affected people who own property, sort of wealthy-ish, well-off people, brilliantly. It did not, however, affect the lower classes that did not own property, and it's pretty much screwed over everyone who's not set to inherit a house, which is a lot of people. And so this has made a lot of poorer people poorer, and a few wealthy people a lot wealthier. So this is a great divide, and it's causing problems, obviously. Now, the government has to tread lightly here. Whether it's a good government or a bad government, a progressive government, a conservative government, the government, any government, let's just say a government that wants to do what I want to do and just pop the bubble. They can't do that. They cannot just pop the bubble because, unfortunately, some people actually just buy houses to like live in. And so by popping that bubble, you would be screwing over the people that just sort of want a house to live in, to reside in. And those people don't deserve to be screwed over. So you can't just straight up pop the bubble. You have to sort of approach it tactfully and intelligently. I will brush over the latest budget because that happened. Look, I thought of this script before they released that, so that's a bit of a spanner in the works here. I'll get around to that. But basically, you can't just plummet housing prices and scrap negative gearing because it would screw over the people that just sort of, moderately own a property instead of the massive property investors that are abusing this system, essentially. But that's where these shows come in. It puts people into that bubble. It creates more people, more voters that the government can't really mess with. They can't mess with these housing prices once the majority of voters own houses. And so that's it's a real catch-22. And this system has been in place for a very long time, and it's made it worse. Screw it, I'm just going to talk about the newest budget now. The newest budget, and I haven't scripted this, I'm going off the top of my head. The latest budget, obviously I haven't read the details of this. I don't read very long documents. I'm not a lawyer, nor am I a politician or a scientist. I don't read massively long documents of boring bureaucratic texts. But I am aware of what it is. I have been paying attention. I don't actually have any complaints about it. Look, they really focused that budget on this specific issue. I mean, not the housing, not the propaganda, but the property itself. They really focused on negative gearing, capital gains, and the inflationary housing market and the selfish landlord class, lazy landlord class, I'll say. So the budget really focused on that, and I'm going to say it took a step in the right direction. It wasn't a leap in the right direction. I just told you why they're not going to make a leap in the right direction and pop the bubble, but it's a step in the right direction. It's much better than a baby step, and it's miles ahead of doing nothing, which is what other parties have been doing the entire time. So I'm pretty happy about it. I'm not about to tell you that the current government is the perfect party. They're not the worst party. And I'm very happy. I'm actually pretty stoked with this budget. I don't have any complaints. I don't think it's going to make things better overnight. I think it will take a while to sort of come to fruition and benefit people, but I'm happy about it. I don't have any complaints with it, unlike the property owning class and evidently the news broadcasters and TV stations. There is a property owning class, and so that's a good segue into where I'm going next. So I don't have to be an investigative journalist to say that these shows are absolutely intended to be propaganda for the property industry. And it's because there are two widely known, not really disputed facts in this country. One, Australian media, especially television and newspapers, is incredibly monopolized. It's owned by very few wealthy people. And pretty much, and a great deal of the television business in this country is, look, the people greenlighting these shows, people responsible for putting these on the air, are either very wealthy or work directly for people that are very wealthy. And so, and that brings me to the other very well-known fact in this country. Wealthy people invest in property. All of them. All wealthy people in this country invest in property because it's, and again, oversimplifying negative gearing, but it's a tax write-off. It is basically a tax write-off. So the conflict of interest is clear as day. It's manipulative. And just think how many shows was there? It's not still rolling, is it? I haven't edited this yet. It should have stopped rolling by now. But there was a lot of them. Can you imagine just what kind of resources, if the money and resources that was put into these shows was actually invested into Australian TV and film and art? we might actually have some soft power amongst the world, because that is a lot of the resources and money put into that propaganda machine. It's so sad. It's so sad that is sort of Hollywood. It's almost as if, hypothetically, the TV networks just sort of decided to invest in television shows about which doctors recommended which brand of cigarettes in the 1950s. It's manipulative. It's not going to be looked upon favorably in the future, and it's just cancer.